Welcome back, friends. So in the previous lecture we discussed about what is selection, what is the importance of selection for an organization, and what are the factors that affect selection. Now in this part we are going to discuss in detail about the selection process and how to make effective selection. The selection process refers to the steps that are involved in choosing people who have the right qualifications to fill a current or a future job opening, and it is often defined as the process of selection and shortlisting of the right candidates with the necessary qualifications and the skill set to fill the vacancies in an organization. Usually the managers and the supervisors are ultimately responsible for hiring of individuals, but the role of human resource management or the human resource manager is to define and guide the managers in this process. So the human resource management or the HR department of an organization has a very, very important, significant and a crucial role as far as selecting of employees is concerned. Every department might be having its own procedures or policies, but the HR department will guide their managers in the entire selection process. And the selection process is not the same. It varies from industry to industry, company to company, and even amongst departments of the same company. So a company with different departments might be having different selection processes or procedures. So this is, you can see the selection process. These are some of the various stages of the selection process. But before we start with the selection process or the steps of the selection process, you must understand the fact that this is a dynamic process, a dynamic procedure, we can say. It is not necessary that all these steps are undertaken in the same sequence, or all these steps are mandatory for all organizations. No, they are not. This is just a generic selection process which mostly organizations follow, but it is not mandatory for every organization to follow each and every step of this procedure, right? So this is just a generic kind of a selection process which starts with preliminary interview, then comes the receiving applications, then screening of those applications is done, and then at times employment tests are conducted, followed by an interview, reference checking of the people who pass the interview, the medical examination, and the final selection is done. So you can miss one or two steps in the entire selection process, or organizations may follow all these processes. So beginning with the preliminary interview or screening interview, here the candidates are eliminated from further selection process who do not meet the minimum eligibility criteria as required by the organization. So individuals are checked for their academic qualifications, their skill sets, their family backgrounds, and their interest in working with the firm. So preliminary interviews are less formal and are basically done to weed out the unsuitable candidates before proceeding with the full-fledged selection process, because we know that during the recruitment process we have accumulated a large number of applicants, we have accumulated a large applicant pool. So it is important to weed out the unsuitable, unfit people before we actually begin with the full-fledged selection procedure. The personal resume presented with the job application is considered as a source of information that can be used for the initial screening, and it mainly includes the information in the areas of employment, the education history, and it gives an insight into the character and helps in evaluating the job performance of an individual. The second step in the process is receiving applications. Now, once the individual qualifies through the preliminary interview, he is required to fill in the application form in the prescribed format. So, every organization has their application form in a certain format. It might be in the physical form or it might be an online form. So, this will require applicant's name, address and their telephone number. Now, this gives a job performance related synopsis of the applicant's life, the skills and accomplishments apart from his age, qualification, experience, etc. And this information helps the interviewer to get a fair idea about the candidate and to formulate certain questions to get more information about him. So, the specific type of information may vary from firm to firm and even by job type within an organization, and application forms are a good way to quickly collect some verifiable and fairly accurate historical data from the candidate. The next step in the process of selection is screening these applications. So, once the applications are received, these are screened by the screening committee, who then prepare a list of those applicants whom they find suitable for the interview that is to be conducted in the next phase. So, in the screening again, some people are moved further and while others are rejected. So, the shortlisting criteria could be age, it could be gender, for certain jobs it could be gender, qualification, experience of an individual. Now, once this list is prepared, the qualified candidates are called for interview either through a registered mail or through emails. So, the selected candidate is communicated through mails or registered mail. If the screening effort is successful, those applicants that do not meet the minimum required qualifications will not move to the next stage in selection process. So, companies utilizing expensive selection procedures put more effort into screening to reduce the cost. So, this we can say is a very crucial aspect of the selection process, because here you are weeding out again the people who we do not think are qualified to be called for the further interview process. So, the next step we can say is employment tests. So, as I already stated, it is not mandatory for every organization to conduct employment test, but many organizations do conduct certain employment tests. So, in order to check the mental ability and skill set of an individual, several tests are conducted. These are intelligence tests, aptitude tests, interest tests, psychological tests, personality tests, etc. These tests are basically conducted to judge the suitability of the candidate for the particular job. And evidence has suggested that the use of tests or employment tests is becoming more prevalent for assessing the applicant's qualifications and potential for the success of the applicant as well as for the success of the organization. Now, tests are used mostly in public sector than in the private sector, and in medium sized and large companies than in small companies. So, again this is conducting a test is a costly affair, and a small company cannot afford to conduct tests for the potential employees. So, now these employment tests are again a very interesting topic of discussion, and there are a large number of tests that are being conducted these days. These types of tests we shall be discussing in a separate lecture. So we will discuss all the types of tests, further subtypes of these tests will also be discussed. Now after the test, the next phase is the job interview. So an interview is a goal oriented conversation in which the interviewer and the applicant, they both exchange information. So the interviewer asks the questions to discover more about the applicant and to give him an accurate picture of the kind of the job he is required to perform. So especially it is significant because applicants who reach this stage are considered to be the most promising candidates. So apart from clearing all the screenings and the employment tests, it is very important to have a one-on-one conversation with the applicant. So through an interview, it is easier for an employer to understand the applicant's expectations from the job, because you cannot write your expectations in an application form, or you cannot write what you expect from the organization or what you expect from your job in an employment test. So for that you need to have a one-on-one interaction with the interviewer or any representative of the organization. And the second advantage of an interview is that you also get to know the communication skills, the confidence level of the applicant, which you cannot identify from the employment test or the application form. So that is why conducting an interview is an art, and it must be done in a very professional manner so that you get the insights of what an applicant perceives, what he desires, what he wants from a particular job. The next step is checking references. Again, very crucial aspect, or a very crucial, we can say, step in the selection procedure. The firms usually ask for the references from the candidate to cross-check the authenticity of the information provided by him. So every application form that one fills for the hiring, we always have a reference section where we mention the people who can vouch for us. It can be the references could be from any educational institute from where the candidate has completed his studies, or it could be his previous employer where he was formally engaged. So these references are checked to know the conduct and behavior of an individual and also his potential of learning new jobs. So the past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. It is often said that past behavior predicts your future behavior, and it is important to gain as much information as possible about the past behavior to predict or to understand what kinds of behavior one can expect from the applicant in the future. So the knowledge about the attendance problems, of certain insubordinate issues, of theft or other behavioral problems can certainly help one avoid hiring someone who is likely to repeat these behaviors. So you must have the knowledge of some insubordination issues or behavioral problems that an applicant might be possessing. So the intensity of background investigations depends on the level of responsibility inherent in the position to be filled. For like say for government organizations or for top level management positions or for positions which hold lot of responsibility and accountability. So for those jobs or for those positions, it is very important that you check the employee's credentials, his behaviors. After going through the reference checks, the next step is the medical examination. So the physical and mental fitness of the candidates are checked to ensure whether he is capable of performing the job or not. And in some organizations, the medical examination is done at the very beginning of the selection process, while in some cases it is done after the final selection. So it depends upon what job you are applying for. For example, in army, navy, or for police jobs, the medical examination is done at the very beginning. Now, the medical examination is again an important step in the selection process, as it helps in ascertaining the applicant's physical ability to fulfill the job requirements. For example, the firefighters must perform activities that require a certain physical conditions like climbing a ladder, lugging a water-filled 4-inch hose, or carrying an injured victim. So, these individuals must demonstrate that they are physically fit for their job. So, this stage is not rigid and it can take place anywhere in the process. So, as I already stated that the entire selection process is very dynamic, and it is not necessary that we have to follow it in the same sequence or same order. So, this can be done in the medical examination can be done in the beginning as well. And then finally, we have the final selection. So, finally, the candidates who qualifies the all rounds of the selection process is intimated about the selection and subsequently given the appointment letter to join the firm. So, that is the final selection and final step of the selection process, where the one who is selected is informed about the joining of the organization. Now, what are the ways of making an effective employee selection? So, all organizations, big or small, make hiring mistakes. As I already stated that we all make certain mistakes while we are selecting people. Though selection seems to be very easy going and very simple, but it is not that simple. So, here are few strategies or ways that researchers suggest to help avoid making the mistakes. So, the first is that determine the criteria a candidate must meet. So, before filling a position, the HR manager of a company must clearly define that what skills, experience, character, educational background, work experience, technical skills and competencies they must possess. Unless you clarify all these things, you will not be able to hire or select a particular person or a person with the required skill sets. So, that is very important that before calling people, you must be very clear in your mind that what people you want to hire, what kind of people, what character they must have, what educational background they must come from. So, that has to be very, very clear in the mind. Second mistake is that hiring without testing. So, skill testing is a must, and every job has some form of measurable objective performance standards. So, you must identify those standards and you must test the applicants for those standards. So, there are tests that can indicate if a job candidate meets the required criteria or not. With these pre-hire screening tools, a recruiter can test the knowledge of potential hires before they are extended the final offer. So, hiring without testing is a mistake that many organizations do commit. The next mistake is hiring after the first interview. So, it is important to have several interviews with the same person. So, a 5 to 10 minutes or a 15-minute one interview will not determine the true character of an individual. So, it should not be done that you just conduct one interview and you hire that individual. You must have several rounds of interview to get a better insight into the character, into the behavior, mannerism of that particular applicant. So, a person may not present the same later, and HR manager may get fresh insights from different meetings. So, when you conduct different meetings, you can get to know the person in a better manner, because every individual will not present or behave in a similar manner in every meeting or in every interview. So, you must have subsequent rounds of interview until you are thoroughly sure of the behavior or what you expect from the person. The next very interesting and very important mistake that we as people or as HR people commit is underestimating the unemployed. So, a person who does not have a job at the moment may be the right fit for the position, but we do not consider him or her because he is presently unemployed. So, that is a hiring mistake that many HR people commit. So, there are plenty of good talent out there who are not hired due to certain reasons. So, you should never underestimate a person who is unemployed. So, you must give a chance, must try to learn more about him or her and try to give them a chance to perform. The next selection error or selection mistake that organizations conduct is poor or no reference checking. So, we have already discussed about the importance of reference checking. So, it is important to know how to conduct a detailed reference check. A proper reference check verifies the job skills and the behavioral fit in which the person operates. So, it is essential to conduct an extensive background investigation and reference checks. If you do not check the past, you cannot anticipate the future. So, reference checks are certain kinds of checks where a person's educational background, person's behaviors, person's skills, person's issues like temper issues or insubordination issues can be highlighted. So, when organizations do not conduct a reference check, they might land up into trouble. The next is that organizations should avoid hiring out of desperation. So, at times there are certain pressures that you have to hire as soon as possible, and when you hire out of desperation, you are certain to make mistakes. You are certain to make decisions that might prove detrimental in future. So, too many hiring decisions are made out of desperation, as I said. So, certain scenarios occur repeatedly, like a key manager quits and he must be replaced now, and there are rapid growth forces a company to fill positions without enough forethought. The programmers are so scarce that anyone will do. So, we fit in people who are a misfit for the job, who are misfit for the organization, who are not skilled enough to perform the particular job. And when we hire employees in haste, in hurry, out of desperation, we may find out later that these recruits are not trustworthy or not competent or skilled enough to perform their job in a competent manner. So, these mistakes must be avoided so that the selection procedure or the selection of employees is done effectively and efficiently. So, friend, in today's lecture, we discussed at length about the selection, what is selection, what is the significance of selection, what are the factors that affect selection, and then we learnt about the various phases of the selection process. So, every organization has a selection process. The process may be a smaller one or it may be a long one, depending upon certain factors, and what mindset you have while selecting people for the organization. And most importantly, it is very pertinent to avoid certain hiring mistakes that every organization commits, because initially we think that selection is a simple process. We just have to call people for interview or call people for the test, and then we can hire them. But no, it should not be done in haste, it should not be done out of desperation, and it should not be done without any reference checking. So these are certain mistakes that organizations commit, which should not be done or which should be avoided. And another mistake that I highlighted in this lecture was that underestimating the unemployed. Many people, many skilled people, I must say, many competent people are unemployed, and certainly due to the pandemic, many people had to lose their jobs due to certain reasons. It could be small children, it could be no financial support, or nobody to take care of the young kids or the elderly. So mostly women were affected. So if a particular employee, a recruit that has come to you but is currently unemployed, so you should not ignore him or her just because he is currently unemployed. He might be having skills that you require. So you must have that open mindset. So you not typecast, or that stereotyping should not be there, that only employed people have to be considered for the particular job. So then another mistake that we discussed is hiring after the first interview, that we conduct one round of interview and we appoint the person. So that should be avoided, and we should have several rounds of interview to get better insights into the individual. Then hiring without testing is also done at times, that we simply hire people without testing their skills, without testing their knowledge. So these are certain mistakes that lead to ineffective and inefficient selection process. So if you want to hire best people, select best people, these mistakes must be avoided. So that was all about the selection process and the mistakes that companies commit, and how we can make the selection process more effective. So we will discuss about certain other aspects of selection in the next couple of lectures. Thank you.